The house was alive with laughter and music as friends poured champagne into glasses, eagerly awaiting the stroke of midnight. Sarah had gone all out for the New Year's Eve party. Streamers hung from every corner, fairy lights twinkled, and the smell of fresh-baked appetizers filled the air. But as the countdown drew closer, an eerie stillness crept in. "Did you guys hear about the midnight visitor?" Sarah asked, her voice cutting through the hum of chatter. The room fell silent as she continued. "It's a local legend. They say that on New Year's Eve, if you hear 3 knocks at the door just before midnight, you must never, ever open it." Everyone chuckled nervously, brushing it off as one of Sarah's spooky tales. "Aha, come on, Sarah, you're just trying to scare us," someone said, raising their glass. But Sarah didn't laugh. "Suit yourselves," she said, a little too seriously. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the party regained its lively energy. The guests gathered around, cheering as the countdown began. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the music stopped. The countdown faltered as everyone exchanged uneasy glances. "Probably the break-up," Sarah said, though her voice trembled. Then it happened. 3 loud knocks echoed from the front door. Knock, knock, knock. The room went deathly quiet. No one moved. No one even breathed. "Someone's playing a prank," a guest finally whispered, breaking the silence. Sarah shook her head. "We're in the middle of nowhere. Who would walk all the way out here just to pull a joke?" The knocks came again, louder this time. Knock, knock, knock. One of the braver guests, Mike, grabbed a flashlight and approached the door. "It's probably nothing, I'll check." "No!" Sarah shouted, stopping him. "You can't open it. Remember the legend?" Mike hesitated, his hand hovering over the doorknob. "Come on, Sarah, it's just a story." As he turned the knob, the lights went out completely, plunging the house into darkness. The guests screamed, and amidst the chaos, a sound sent chills down everyone's spine. It wasn't knocking anymore, it was scratching. Long, deliberate scrapes against the wood. Sarah whispered, "I told you, don't open it." The scratching stopped, and for a moment there was only silence. Then, a low, guttural voice from the other side of the door whispered, "Let me in." Panic erupted. The guests scrambled, searching for a way out. The windows wouldn't budge, and the back door was inexplicably locked. There, standing silently in the shadows, was a figure dressed in black, their face obscured. They didn't move, didn't speak, they just watched. The clock struck midnight, and the room was filled with the sound of cheers and fireworks from outside. But inside, no one celebrated. They were too afraid to even breathe. When the lights flickered off again, the figure disappeared. By morning, the house was empty. The neighbors found it eerily quiet, with no sign of Sarah or her guests. Only the front door swinging gently in the wind, and the faint sound of scratching fading into the distance. Story No. 2. The invitation arrived mysteriously, slipped under Emma's door on the morning of December 31st. The golden envelope shimmered with an inscription. "You're cordially invited to the midnight masquerade. Celebrate the new year in a night you'll never forget. Happy New Year." It provided no address, just a meeting point, a forest clearing outside of town, along with a strict dress code, formal attire, and a mask. Emma was hesitant, but the allure of the unknown was too tempting to resist. She put on her best gown, a silver mask that sparkled like frost, and headed into the woods as the moon hung low in the sky. The clearing was already bustling with elegantly dressed figures in masks of all shapes and designs. A hauntingly beautiful melody played from somewhere unseen, echoing through the trees. Lanterns hung from branches, casting an ethereal glow. "Welcome," a tall man in a black mask said as Emma entered the circle. His voice was smooth, but his eyes behind the mask were sharp, almost predatory. "Thank you," Emma replied nervously. She mingled, drank champagne, and danced to the hypnotic music. The guests were lively, but something about them felt off. Their movements were too graceful, their laughter too hollow. At one point, Emma struck up a conversation with a woman in a crimson gown. "This party is amazing," Emma said, trying to mask her unease. "It is," the woman replied with a strange smile. "But it's not like other parties. You'll see." As midnight approached, the music grew louder, more frantic. The guests gathered around a massive bonfire in the center of the clearing, their masked faces illuminated by the flames. "Prepare yourselves," the man in the black mask announced. "When the clock strikes 12, we shall welcome the new year, and the guest of honor." The air grew colder and shadows danced wildly around the clearing. Dong! Emma tried to back away, but the crowd closed in, their masked faces eerily still as they chanted. When the final chime rang out, the fire exploded in a blinding flash. Standing in its place was a towering figure, draped in black, its face hidden behind a grotesque mask. The chanting stopped. Silence fell over the clearing. The figure turned its head slowly, scanning the crowd, until its gaze landed on Emma. She felt its eyes, even through the mask. "You," it said in a voice that was both a whisper and a roar. Emma's heart pounded as the crowd parted, pushing her toward the figure. She struggled, but their hands were firm. "What is this? Let me go!" she screamed. "You were chosen," the man in the black mask said, his tone devoid of emotion. "For what?" Emma cried. "To ring in the new year," he replied, stepping aside as the towering figure reached for her. The last thing Emma saw was the fire reigniting, consuming everything in its path. By morning, the clearing was empty, the bonfire reduced to ash. Emma was never seen again, but those who wandered into the woods claimed to hear faint music and laughter until the next New Year's Eve, when another invitation would appear, waiting for the next guest. Story number 3. "Tonight," Victor declared as the clock neared 11 p.m., "we'll play a little game. I call it the Resolution Room." Everyone laughed nervously, unsure if Victor was joking. He led the group into a dimly lit room at the back of the house. The air felt heavier there, and a faint, sour smell lingered. The room was sparse, containing only an antique table with a large, ornate mirror leaning against the wall behind it. On the table sat a single flickering candle and a stack of yellowed parchment paper. "Here's how it works," Victor explained. "You write your New Year's resolution on the paper. Then you place it in front of the mirror and say it aloud. Simple, right?" "Sounds boring," one guest scoffed. "I don't remember vigorously." But this isn't just any mirror. This mirror shows you who you'll become if you break your resolution. If you're brave enough to look, that is." Most of the group rolled their eyes or laughed, but Ryan felt a shiver run down his spine. The mirror's surface shimmered faintly, as if alive. One by one, the guests took their turns. They wrote down resolutions like quit smoking or lose weight and mockingly stared into the mirror. Nothing happened. Finally, it was Ryan's turn. He hesitated, the weight of his own guilt pressing down on him. For years he'd promised himself to reach out to his estranged younger brother, whom he hadn't spoken to since their mother's death. He always made excuses, too busy, too awkward, but deep down, he knew it was cowardice. Certainly, he picked up the pen and scrawled his resolution. "This year, I'll reconnect with my brother." His hand trembled as he placed the paper before the mirror. "I'll reconnect with my brother," he said aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the candle flickered violently, and the room grew icy cold. The mirror's surface darkened until it was pitch black. "Victor, what's happening?" Ryan asked, but Victor was silent, his smirk replaced by wide-eyed fear. The darkness in the mirror began to swirl, and a figure emerged. It was Ryan, but not the Ryan standing in the room. This version of him was gaunt, with hollow eyes and a haunted expression. The reflection leaned closer to the glass, its lips twisting into a sneer. "You'll never do it," it hissed. "You'll find another excuse. You'll let the days slip by until it's too late, and when he's gone, you'll live with the regret forever." "No," Ryan stammered, stepping back. "That's not true. I'll call him tomorrow." The reflection laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "You won't. And when you finally realize what you've lost, you'll wish you'd been the one who died." The room filled with a deafening roar, the mirror's surface cracking violently. Ryan's head spun, and then everything went black. When he woke up, he was alone in the room. The mirror was gone, as was the candle and the parchment. Stumbling out of the mansion, he found it eerily silent. The other guests and even Victor had vanished. That night, Ryan called his brother. The phone rang and rang, but there was no answer. The next day, he received the news. His brother had passed away in the early hours of New Year's Day. From then on, Ryan couldn't escape the image of his own haunted reflection. It was always there, lurking just out of sight, reminding him of what he'd lost. Every New Year's Eve, the weight of his broken resolution grew heavier, and the laughter of the reflection echoed in his mind, mocking him endlessly.